Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Trevor Norris. I'm the director of the Posthumanism Research Institute at Brock University. We've had a variety of speakers over this year, and we're culminating and ending the year with this topic. Our past speakers can be viewed on our YouTube channel. We do have some more planned for next year, but we haven't posted that yet. Um, so thanks very much to Çağdaş Dedeoğlu, who will be speaking today about dark green religion meets the posthuman, post-Islamic eco-spirituality under the neoliberal Anthropocene. Çağdaş is a professor at Yorkville University and involved with the posthuman lab, which he includes his email address there for both. And at the end, we will have a QR code for the posthuman lab. Çağdaş is a real leader in the area of making links between posthumanism and political topics and political concepts, a special focus on citizenship. But today's focus is more on environmental issues, especially in the Turkish context, in relation to religious questions. So thank you very much again for joining us, and looking forward to your talk.
Thank you so much, Trevor. Good morning, everyone. Today, as the title suggests, I would like to do a couple of things, a few concepts in the title. Dark green religion meets the posthuman, post-Islamic eco-spirituality under the neoliberal Anthropocene. Trevor already mentioned a little bit about my background, and today what I will do probably is about walking you through my research journey, starting from political ecology to religion and nature studies to posthumanism to citizenship studies. So it's almost a full circle. It's an exploration, a re-exploration, some learning and unlearning things type of journey. Obviously, I am from the Turkish background originally, but I have been living in Canada since 2018. So coming here, engaging with indigenous cosmologies, a different political system, these experiences also made me reconsider my earlier assumptions and also reflect on the Turkish case in a more pluralistic way. And I hope I will share some of these learning moments with you today. So we already shared the topic, and I have a kickoff survey, just one question. Do you think Islamic religiosity is positively or negatively associated with environmental behavior, Islamic religiosity and environmental behavior? The literature about it is complicated. There are different approaches to it, and mostly the answer to that type of question is not sure, right? And we are in this safe position when we say not sure, and I hope I will show in this presentation what not sure means, because it is complicated and there are different layers to it. I will do two things in this talk. First, I will share the findings of our recent paper, Beyond Religious Secular Divides, with my wonderful colleagues, my friend Tuğrul Hakkemez and my mentor, Bron Taylor, recently published in the Journal of the Study of Religion, Nature and Culture. But I will not stop there. I also spent a few minutes exploring what these findings may mean for posthuman citizenship, broadly speaking. And I am hoping that such a discussion, even briefly, will help us to make some connections. So two terminologies, first Dark religion, then the posthuman. Dark religion is developed by Bron Taylor and published as a book in 2009. It refers to belief systems and cultural practices that regard nature as sacred and intrinsically valuable. Unlike traditional religions that are rooted in anthropocentric and theistic metaphysics or institutional dogma, DGR encompasses a broad range of individuals and movements who experience nature as spiritually meaningful and deserving of reverent care. Then, a quick, very brief genealogy of posthumanism. It is a diverse concept. I have seen different interpretations and want to classify them following Rosie Braidotti and Francesca Ferrando in 5 dimensions. Posthumanism may be understood as a decolonial and justice-oriented approach about the concerns related to human domination of other humans, but also as a post-anthropocentric orientation towards multi-species justice, concerning about human domination of non-humans, a post-dualist approach, how we can move beyond binaries, nature, culture, of course, religion, science, or religion, secular. I also want to include 2 more dimensions. Post-enlightenment, about moving beyond the enlightenment thinking and seeing human beings as rational, autonomous subjects. It's more complicated than that. That means we need to embrace epistemic humility and develop an embodied understanding of knowledge and human experience. And finally, maybe not primarily relevant here today, post-technologism is about a critique of techno-solutionism, which is obviously based on capitalist innovation and growth understanding. So a little bit reflection is needed. I depart from a diverse angle. Post-humanism is about decolonial and justice-oriented thinking, while post-anthropocentrism is about multi-speciesism and material agency. Post-dualism is about collecting binaries and going beyond dualities in our thinking and acting, maybe thinking, acting, even feeling, thinking, acting, in a sense. Post-enlightenment is to move beyond rational, autonomous individual conceptualization, and of course, it's an inheritance from enlightenment thinking. We need to move beyond such epistemologic tendencies, embrace epistemic humility and embodied knowledge. And finally, post-technologism, maybe not a central question in today's talk, but still very important. It's based on a critique of techno-solutionism. And then within such a diversity, the posthuman, maybe at least for me, can refer to 2 different meanings: an earthly state of becoming, an individual mode of existence. Of course, these 2, one refers to posthuman condition and the other refers to posthuman becoming. These are not isolated efforts or experiences. They are always entangled with each other as well, which means as an individual, I may feel like I am caring more than human beings. I am developing an awareness, but this is not independent of global political, ecological transformations, injustices, or technological assemblages, etc. So these are speaking to each other when we look at our experience as an embodied, entangled one. And then the context and the problem for our research paper. As I mentioned, it has focused on Turkey. And we, in order to understand the context, we looked at three dimensions: the climate reality, the political reality, and the cultural reality. Turkey, although the country is not at the top countries contributing to climate change, the trends are always upward since 1990s, and climate change performance index-wise, the country is not in a great position. Of course, the political reality is not very promising either. There is an authoritarian neoliberal governance with growth-oriented strategies. So the title Neoliberal Anthropocene is combining neoliberal growth strategies with an anthropocentric, human-first, or maybe elites-first approach. Can you hear me? Okay, because I saw the mic was muted. Now it's okay. So the cultural reality is also complex. Although when you, and as an outsider, when you look at Turkey, you will probably read things like, oh, 99% of the country is Muslim. But the reality is different. There are pre-Islamic and post-Islamic, as we will see, tendencies within the cultural context. It's just another cosmopolitan, multicultural environment. It is not. It's not statistically maybe seen that way mostly, especially by the census results. But the reality is more complex than that. And our concern in this paper was that mostly studies are focusing on what the government is doing, what harm against nature is being undertaken, very important work, but there's less about what people are doing, environmental movements or every citizen, how they see their environment, what might be a possibility for future. So we wanted to look at that side of things a little bit. So our research design is based on three research questions. First, what is the relationship between Islamic religiosity and pro-environmental behavior? This is the classical literature. We follow the literature. If religious beliefs have any effect on pro-environmental behaviors or attitudes, so we follow the literature. Then between Islamic and dark green religious forms, what can be said about those relations? And thirdly, the relationship between dark green religion or religious values and pro-environmental behavior. We conducted online survey-based research. We received responses, usable responses around 500 almost. We used three scales: Islamic religiosity, dark green religiosity, and environmental behavior. Of course, the questions were already tested in different contexts for confidence and trust wise. And For the Darwin religion scale, we extracted 3 subscales: nature-based religiosity, bio-ecocentrism, wonder, and humility. We extracted those subscales using statistical analysis, focusing on relevant questions. So we gathered answers from the questions to create those subscales. And I don't want to go into the details of the research design, but you may also see on the screen, we tested 7 hypotheses. The first one from Islamic religiosity to pro-environmental behavior, but also individual hypotheses for each connection, potential connection, and we used structural equation modeling for our analysis. The first team, we discussed our findings in 3 teams. So the first team, from Islamic religiosity to pro-environmental behavior in Turkey. It's interesting for us. It was interesting for us to see that Islamic religiosity is positively associated with nature-based spirituality and wonder and humility. This was interesting. This was kind of against the overall literature. Overall literature is mostly seeing it negatively, but we found a positive association. But that association is not translated into pro-environmental behavior directly, which means there is a disconnection. So on the numbers will tell us how it is statistically significant. The model explains a variance of pro-environmental behavior, but it is only through wonder and humility. And wonder and humility, without wonder and humility, Islamic religiosity is not automatically translated into pro-environmental behavior. So this was an interesting finding for us. The second theme relates to Darwinian religion, pro-environmental behavior relationship. Of course, it also relates to the first finding. I mentioned that Islamic religiosity is not automatically translated into pro-environmental behavior, but for younger folks, there's an interesting situation. Wonder and humility is higher among younger folks, and it creates a nature-based spirituality connection going to pro-environmental behavior. So this is important. Average population in our sample does not show an association between nature-based spirituality and pro-environmental behavior, but younger folks, for the youth, 18-24, there is an association. So we say nature-based spirituality is associated with pro-environmental behavior among youth. And we wanted to explain this phenomena with post-economic eco-spirituality. It reflects a post-secular religious spiritual positioning beyond Islam that is less conservative with respect to traditional monotheistic norms, but more conservative in relation to nature. And another research conducted in Turkey also kind of confirms our finding, because according to that research, religious conservatism among young people is decreasing in the last decade or so in an authoritarian and kind of Islamist, maybe more complex than calling it Islamist, but yeah, authoritarian neoliberal context. Religious conservatism is decreasing among young people, and our finding says this might be interesting for environmental behavior as well. Another explanation for nature-based spirituality pro-environmental behavior might be pre-Islamic Turkic cosmologies and animism. Shamanism, in this sense, the elements of shamanism, pre-Islamic elements of shamanism can be found in Alevi Bektashi forms of religiosity in Turkey and in the Turkish experience, and I mean, obviously, Kurdish experience. And this may be influential on modern contemporary environmentalism in Turkey. That was another interpretation for us. And the third theme, political ecology under authoritarian neoliberal regimes. This theme, I think we need to be a little bit careful about interpreting it. We use, of course, we had to use a binary construct, nation alliance and non-nation alliance, or others, which includes People's Alliance, conservative and nationalist parties, I mean the ruling party and its ally, and pro-minority unaffiliated people. So this does not mean that People's Alliance and pro-minority groups, Kurdish movement, or them, their political representative, are on the same page on political ecological issues. But we are trying to interpret how we can understand it. First, our finding: positive association between Islamic religiosity and nature-based spirituality is stronger among voters outside the nation alliance. The nation alliance, the oppositional bloc, is mostly understood as secular oppositional party. But what we find, or what is important for future possibilities, was that there's a positive association between voters of non-nation alliance. Those people might be voting to the ruling party or alternative pro-minority or leftist groups as well. So two possible scenarios. Or first, some nationalist conservative voters may attribute sacredness to nature as God's creation, but what they feel, remember there was a misconnection, translation issue from Islamic religiosity to pro-environmental behavior. Even if they believe in sacred nature, they may not politically, economically, they may not have the tools to translate it into environmental action. The second option, the second scenario, there may be unaffiliated individuals in that group, and those people may simultaneously hold religious beliefs and embrace nature-based spiritual values, reflecting a more integrative or non-aligned worldview. If the second scenario is correct, then we should re-emphasize post-Islamic eco-spirituality situation here. Both scenarios may be at play here as well, and there needs to be conducted more research on it. And of course, this picture, even within those two scenarios, it is very complicated, and I will show you why. This documentary is from 2022. There were wildfires, forest fires in Turkey, as in Canada and Australia, because of the climate change related issues, combined with political ecological realities. And this documentary focuses on the lives of seasonal workers laboring in the aftermath of wildfires. Let's hear what they will say and how can we interpret it within the nexus of political ecology and religion. It's Turkish, but there are English subtitles. Let me put it quickly. All right. I think this very short scene tells us so many things. First, we see at least two diverse, different religiosity related experiences. Obviously, one of them is preparing to pray, and the other one says it would be great if we come here for praying, but we need clean water, we have other survival needs. And what brings those two groups together is the political economic realities, precarious realities of the system, and that makes things even more complicated. And obviously, this is happening under authoritarian neoliberal context. Based on such a complex picture, we try to develop three policy-related suggestions. The first one, policy interventions should complement scientific storytelling with effective pathways. Otherwise, we cannot succeed in translating worldviews into action. Educational models specifically should integrate scientific reasoning with nature-based spirituality models, reflecting the diversity of, again, connections with the world and the nature. And finally, pro-environmental platforms, NGOs, for instance, should recognize that the human experience is inherently spiritual, embracing darker values to build inclusive, effective ecological stewardship. So this is where we stop in the paper. But now I want us to think together. Darker religion meets the posthuman. Somewhere else, I tried to develop a framework, post-secular, posthuman religion. And what I see in this empirical data, wonder and humility as a factor linking belief to environmental behavior, the youth group shifts towards post-Islamic eco-spirituality and shamanic teachings as sources of lived religion in Turkey. These are, for me, some also implications towards post-secular, post-human religion. For instance, Braidotti's concept of residual spirituality as a force of affirmation and immanence beyond institutional religion. We have seen it in our corpus and in our analysis. The other one, an understanding of spirituality as relational, entangled, and interconnected, as mentioned by Francesca Ferrando, breaking from anthropocentric and dualist theologies. Again, very relevant discussion point. And finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, after coming to Canada, I started to reflect more and more on pre-Islamic shamanic orientations of Turkey, and it mirrors indigenous cosmologies worldwide, affirming the role of non-human agency and planetary interdependency in shaping alternative forms of political subjectivity. So this dimension, post-secular, post-human religion dimension or spiritual dimension, whatever concept you would like to use, this is about going beyond, obviously, dualities as well as anthropocentric tendencies, dividing spiritual and matter, material, human, non-human, reason, reverence, or feeling. In this sense, I would say Darwin religion is post-secular, post-human religion, and this is what this pluralistic approach is what I directly connect to my understanding of post-human citizenship, because we need to go beyond the limited understanding of citizenship as a state oriented, rights-based, or responsibility-based framework. It is about post-human deeds, what we are doing, how we think, act today, and how we can combine, merge different social movements, different worldviews to act in solidarity. That's for me the question, and in this sense, post-human religion directly relevant to post-human citizenship as well. I think I am stopping here. Thank you so much for your patience, and I hope we will have some discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. I mentioned at the beginning of the talk that anybody that would like to ask questions, can you please email them to me? I'm monitoring my email right now. And a reminder again, the email address is tnorris@brocku.ca. So I've got that open. I know there's a 1 minute lag from when we're talking until it's posted on YouTube. So we can just wait for a moment. But while we're waiting, if I can ask you a question to elaborate on something you were referring to towards the end, which is a bit of a comparison between pre-Islamic traditions in the region, or at least in Turkey. Can you say more about how you see that impacting environmental attitudes?
Of course, thank you so much for the question. Broadly speaking, we can say Anatolian tradition is a hub for a diversity of worldviews, of course, also ideological confrontations, probably religious confrontations as well. But it's not how I see it. I see it as a rich culture, and within its richness, we also see a direct connection with nature. For instance, in our paper, we shared a couple of examples. One of them is again after the wildfires, it became more and more prominent how an Anatolian village normally approaches these situations, how they collaborate with animals, with gods, to preserve environmental conditions, and it's also kind of a wildfire prevention method. And also, it doesn't stop there. It's not a utilitarian approach. Oh, we collaborate animals for utilitarian purposes. It's also reciprocal, respectful approach, in the sense that they call those animals with their names, individual, unique names. It's not like goats as a broad category, or trees as a broad category. We know the importance of naming in terms of human consciousness and subconsciousness, probably. And in this sense, I see some similarities between indigenous cosmologies and pre-Islamic cosmologies of Anatolia, the Anatolian Turkey, or Asian part of Turkey, we can say. But this also not as a separate, isolated cosmology. It has infused through other teachings, Islamic teachings as well, specifically Alevi tradition. You know, in Turkey, the majority is Sunni. We don't know whether or not it is lived religion in the country, but traditionally it's what it is. But we see those intersections, overlappings between pre-Islamic cosmologies and contemporary Alevi depictions of lived religion as well. And I am planning to further this research with another this time site visit in Turkey. Hopefully, it will be next year's research focus. Thank you so much for the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, we do have a first question coming in, which is said to be almost as well as a comment, which is your description of Turkey is similar to some parallels in the North American context, in which there is a history of indigenous spirituality in further back in history, and then Christianity in North America in the last few centuries. And that in the Canadian context, a lot of the opposition against, for example, oil and gas industries or other activities that are harmful to the environment, a lot of the opposition has been coming from indigenous groups. So that's more of a comment than a question, but it's pointing out the parallels between the two contexts, the Turkish and the Canadian or North American context, in which there's both a more recent, comparatively, arrival of a monotheism that's quite different from the prior religious groups. So is there anything you can say about that?
There may be some notions we should mention. As I mentioned at the beginning, this has been still it's a learning process for me. And when you learn things, it's a two-way learning. I am learning from indigenous cosmologies, and it makes me reflect on other cases. Of course, by my experience, it is Turkish experience and monotheistic Islamic secular versus religious duality, and how we can move beyond it, but also vice versa. What the Turkish case, as mentioned in the comment, with environmental struggles, environmental conflicts, what narration approaches or storytelling approaches are being used, how at the end of the day it's about mobilizing people, and how we can mobilize more people towards environmental action. Obviously, we should also look at the spiritual dimension. And when we look at the history of religion in the Western context, and Northwestern, Northern American context is also part of the Western context, but through French laïcité and the division of state and religion, Turkish case is also part of the Western history of religion. So in this sense, when we look at monotheistic Christianity or Christianity of settler colonials, colonizers coming to occupy the lands and extracting and exploiting both materialities and spiritualities. Of course, this has implications for the Turkish case as well. And if this is the case, if it is not spirituality versus materiality, but both, then our resistance, I don't like calling it resistance, more than resistance, our game to play must be also paying attention to both spiritual and material elements. That's at least what I have learned so far. Thank you so much
Okay.
for the comment / question.
Okay, good. Thank you. We do have two more questions that have come in. One is which, in summarizing, the focus of your talk is more about the current cultural practices and political practices in Turkey, but there's also a question about religious texts, and a comparison as well. Um, in the Christian context, there is the notion of stewardship in the Bible,
Mhm.
and that's often overlooked in a lot of current Christian practices towards environmental issues. So the question is then about if you can be more specific about um, any way in which nature or the environment is discussed in the Quran.
Mm. Uh, I always prefer to leave that discussion to theologians. I am not a theologian. I I was a postdoc in critical religion studies at University of Florida, and that's how my investigations into religion, nature, or religion environment nexus started. But we need to differentiate between theological approaches and social scientific study of religion and nature. Obviously, there are ayat verses we can find from Quran about environmental stewardship, but we can also find verses for dominance. So this path for me is not going anywhere. But this is my personal position, and my positionality is obviously social scientific study of religion. I believe that type of approach, using theological interpretations, may also be helpful for specific audiences. I do not say they will not help, but we need a broader umbrella to create unified action. I don't think theology is the umbrella. Human experience might be the umbrella. Theology, science, and other dimensions might be a part of it. That's, for me at least, important. We should let it to people decide how they should act. This is also related, of course, my pluralistic understanding. But I appreciate, I mean, dominance versus stewardship. Obviously, I supported Pope Francis' approach, which is also Franciscan approach in the historical religious differentiation, Dominican Church versus Franciscan Church. And of course, name selection, it was not a coincidence. It was a different brotherhood approach to nature, and I appreciate it. But I also appreciate, Islamic declaration for climate change and other declarations. But we need to look at the practice, and the practices, they are based on human experience, political, economic, ecological experiences. That's where I am distinguishing the social scientific study of religion and nature.
Okay, so your focus is on the social science approach and human practices more so than textual interpretation or theological debates or that kind of thing. Okay, thank you. So another question coming actually from our associate director of the PRI, Elizabeth Neswald. She says she's been recently begun looking at environmental and ecological approaches in Judaism and was wondering whether there is an interfaith communication about these issues.
Of course, there are such efforts. Maybe recent global political, geopolitical struggles a little bit undermined those community efforts. But interfaith communication has always been the goal for some groups. I know some folks are focusing on environmental ethics in Judaism as well. Tanhum, my good friend at University of Toronto, is for instance doing such important work. But again, my focus is on the broader umbrella, how we can connect different onto-epistemological trends, not in an exclusionary way. My concern is not, Islam is more environmental friendly than another religion, or less environmental friendly, because the textual in this debate, I think I feel more like I am trying to differentiate the holy text from the literature, or literary text. How we interpret it is the question here, and this question is a broader question than whether or not a religion is positively or relatively related. That's why I don't use religion, I use religiosity. It's individual's experience, not the corpus itself.
Okay, thank you. I'll just add that Elizabeth, and as well, just emailed to say that she works with Tanhum. So there's some connection there.
Yeah.
If I can ask a question of my own, and looking at your last overhead here, the notion of posthuman and citizenship, can you say something about, as much as you're able, about the practice of citizenship in democratic versus non-democratic contexts? It's certainly citizenship we associate with, being member of a country, but there's also this being a citizen of a democratic country has an impact on practice that's quite significantly different from being a citizen in a non-democratic country. And certainly we're seeing a lot of deterioration of formerly relatively established democracies, like in the West, like in the US, but also other countries that potentially look to becoming more democratic are not going in that direction. So can you say something more about this, how you think the larger political context impacts this?
This is something I have been thinking a lot. Currently, as you mentioned at the beginning, I am editing two special issues on two separate journals regarding posthumanism, citizenship intersection, but also for my own book project, Political Posthumanism, I have been thinking how, of course, we cannot talk about one size fits all solutions because of the differentiation you just made between democratic, slightly more democratic and less democratic context. Unfortunately, democracy has been undermined all over the world. But maybe we should say less uncertainty and more uncertainty in the system. This is the basic difference. I don't want to say more democratic or less democratic, but some systems are more predictable for citizens and obviously non-citizens as well. And other systems are too complicated. Authoritarian growth tendencies are just changing things in a night, right? So what can be done? Obviously, in a system and in a lack of system situation, our actions may be different. In more and less institutionalization, probably the keyword. I would say, for instance, in the Republic of Ireland or Spain, those countries are now operating through citizen assemblies, right? But I don't think how a citizen assembly. I don't know how a citizen assembly may work in the North American context. People believe, oh, I pay my tax, I vote, that's okay. Or maybe I am part of a social cause. I am donating maybe to church or to an NGO, depending on my again religiosity. And then that's all. No, it's not. And we see in the other side of the border, it's not enough. And for countries such as Turkey, it was never enough, and we are now facing the consequences. And what has started 20 years ago in Turkey, 2002, now it can be seen in other countries, in the US, and in a little bit in Canada, but still the system is more predictable here. I don't know until when it will be like this. And as a now Canadian citizens, I am concerned about it because we are familiar with this from earlier experience. That's now one of my goals, to do whatever it takes to turn things into more democratic possibilities. Thank you for the question again.
That's encouraging. And just to kind of state the obvious, it's not necessarily the case that more democratic countries are invariably better at protecting their environment. Ideally, yes. But I think we have more of a spectrum rather than a division between non-democratic and democratic countries. And certainly there's more opportunities for opposition or resistance in democratic countries, but there's no shortage of environmental disasters in democratic countries. So
And
I'll just
it is not. Thank you for reminding this. It's not also limited to environmental disasters. I mean, democracy, Western democracy, is built upon injustice. Unfortunately, I mean, we should be very careful what we are following or trying to follow. What type of democracy it is, right? So this is the complexity. There is no solution if you follow it or try to implement. Everything will be okay. I don't see any optimism in it, unfortunately. So it should be something in the making, alternatively. That's why post-human citizenship, for me, is about such alternatives. It might be degrowth approaches, prosumer economies, social justice movements merging with multi-species justice movements. So it cannot be just one political approach, ideological liberal approach, and if we vote for it, everything will be all right. We know nothing will be all right if we do not be part of the conversation. That's about citizenship, being part of the conversation, practically.
I think certainly democracies are unfortunately very easily captured by capital interests. And so regardless of voting patterns, the state can easily be captured. That's one of the limitations of democracy. I think that's kind of maybe what you've been alluding to. So we don't have any more questions right now, but I just want to reiterate to our speakers that if they would like to ask any questions, to email me at tnorris. I've gotten some already, but we can pause for a minute and see if there's any last questions coming in. And in the meantime, because I know there's a short lag, is there anything else you would like to add to your presentation or any other projects you have on the go regarding this topic?
Thank you for the opportunity. It's always very good to reflect on what you have done so that you may do things differently in the future. You already mentioned about citizenship related agenda. If anyone currently or in the future interacting with this video, they can reach out to me. You can you can see my email addresses. We have been doing some research with folks under the Posthuman lab as well. You can scan the QR code, and we will continue collaborating with Posthumanism Research Institute. There will be more in the future. Please stay tuned. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just add that you're a real leader in making the link between politics, citizenship, and posthumanism. And there's not a lot that's been published in this area, but you are currently doing a book, an edited journal special issue on the topic, and so we'll look forward to that. We do record this and post it on our YouTube page, so we'll be doing that in the near future. So thanks again very much, and I appreciate your talk.
Thank you so much.